forum that is finally taking place in person after 2.5 years in this summertime. That is also a pretty exceptional context for the web discussions. And we'll be talking about the future of money. That I think is the main maybe topic of the web in general, because money is not only currency that we use as means of payment, but money is actually something that is enabling and empowering socioeconomic changes that in its turn enable handling big global issues related to diversity, inclusion, climate action, etc. So I'm very happy to introduce you to my wonderful co-panelists, and I would like them to introduce themselves, highlighting the relation you have to the future of money and to the present of money. Let's start with Makoto.
Okay, thanks for the intro. So I'm Makoto Takemiya. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Soramitsu. We're a Japanese blockchain company that was founded 6 years ago. And also I'm a contributor to many open source projects, including Sora and Hyperledger Iroha. So I do quite a lot of work. I'm kind of a hands-on type of CEO, so I'm an engineer by training. And I don't micromanage, but I do take part in a lot of technical designs with my team. And I would say out of the projects we've done, the most exciting have been a CBDC solution for the Central Bank of Cambodia, which is a retail CBDC system that went live in 2020. And also the Sora decentralized economic system. So both of these two systems really push forth the future of money, and it kind of shows us that the future of money is not something that is happening to us. It's something that we can actively create and design and be a part of.
Thank you very much. How many times have you been to Davos for the WEF?
This is my 3rd time.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move forward. Johannes.
Hello, Johannes Duong is my name, from the Austrian National Bank. I'm working in the Treasury Department for security settlement and financial instrument settlement. And before the panel Jon mentioned, many central banks are now doing researches on CBDC. And there are 2 types of CBDC. One is the retail CBDC for private consumers, and the second one is the wholesale CBDC for institutional transactions. And for us in the Treasury Department, it is important to analyze the wholesale CBDC for security settlement. That's why we introduced the project DeFi in Austria with the Austrian Treasury. Together we tokenized the Austrian government bond, an existing government bond on a blockchain. And parallel for the research, just for the research only, we created a wholesale CBDC based on euro on a blockchain. But it has nothing to do with the digital euro project of the ECB, because it's focused on the retail side. What we do, we are together also with Swiss National Bank, Banque de France, we are experimenting the wholesale side for the security settlement. Thank you.
How many WEFs in your portfolio?
Sorry?
How many WEFs have you attended?
WEFs, the first one. It's the first time.
Awesome. So you're enjoying it in full?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk about this later. Jason, your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Chlipala. I'm the COO of the Stellar Development Foundation. Stellar is one of the older Layer 1 public blockchains. It was started in 2014, and the Stellar Development Foundation is the entity or the people who created it, and now we shepherd the code base, work with regulators, lawmakers, and work with businesses building on the network. And as for how this fits with the future of money, Stellar was designed for asset issuance. I like to say it was designed for stablecoins before that was a term that anyone was using. Right from the beginning, the idea was create digital representations of existing assets, mainly fiat currencies, and use them for payments. So we do a lot of work very focused on stablecoins. These are fiat-backed, reserved stablecoins, not algorithmic, like we heard about in the previous panel. And so I think that very much is already moving money forward, and that is a huge use case that we focus on.
And it's your second WEF, right?
Second, yes. I was on a panel right here 2 years ago, yes.
Awesome. I'm Kristina Lucrezia Cornér, editor-in-chief at CoinTelegraph, one of the biggest and largest publications, biggest and oldest publications, and also largest publications in the world dedicated to blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And we're actually bringing education on the space for the community and also for the newbies who want to join it. We were founded almost 10 years ago, and it's our fourth WEF in person. Plus a lot of online events that have taken place during the pandemic. Why I asked you about the WEF? Because in my opinion, the WEF represents this powerful, incumbent, influential community that is setting up agenda for a lot of important changes. We are representing here a blockchain community that is pretty a newbie in this world of making decisions. So my next question to you is, how do you see the development of interaction between traditional finance and fintech, blockchain, DeFi, since, let's say, the beginning of pandemic? How do you see its path developing, and how do you see these two big communities bridging these recent years, months? Whoever wants to start, Makoto.
Yeah, so this is quite a deep question, and it's hard to go really into a lot of details, I think, in a panel format. But yeah, just to focus really on the interaction between TradFi and DeFi, especially some of the trends. The two, don't have to be completely opposed to each other. There are touch points where they can collaborate, and that's where you have the regulation, that's where you have the KYC, the source of funds, all these things to kind of move money in and out. Because there's always a place for a TradFi system. So you have banking infrastructure is really crucial to society. You don't want to completely disrupt that overnight. That would cause quite a lot of chaos. But DeFi has some really important ideas. And among these ideas are financial inclusion, the idea that anyone with a computer internet connection should be able to make a transaction if you have assets. If you have your assets, you should be able to use them without anyone telling you, how you should use them. So that's a really important concept, because it pushes forth the idea that property rights are a basic human right. And I think that's overlooked too much in the TradFi realm, just because they also have other objectives like profit motive and things like that. And DeFi is a little bit more, let's be honest, it's a bit, people are a bit idealistic and maybe not only profit driven, but also want to change the world and maybe, fix some of the inadequacies that we see in the existing system. So it's a really democratization of finance. But the short answer is I think the two can work together. But the WEF is generally seen as like kind of the entrenched elites, right, that are kind of trying to preserve the existing system. I mean, that's the stereotype. It may not be true. And us here at these blockchain events, we're kind of like the barbarians at the gate, trying to to push our ideas forward and to be heard. And I think the ideal situation for humanity lives between the two. And I think that's kind of what these ideas will come together and coalesce into some vision of the future that everyone can kind of agree with.
Do you have a time horizon for that?
Oh, geez. Things are speeding up, right? Especially with various economic trends around the world and geopolitical. I would say by 2030, we should see quite a different world than we have today.
Yeah, also because if we do not change a lot of sides of our behavior, economic, financial, environmental, by 2030, well, we risk having a pretty different world. Johannes, so you represent this other side of the mirror.
Yep.
How do you see this blockchain space coming to you, and do you think that the bridges are already stable enough in order to, continue push forward this collaboration?
So first of all, in Austria is maybe a little bit different than the other countries, because we have, as a national bank, a very deep contact to the fintech scene in Austria. So we're also presenting in the FinTech Week coming in June in Austria. There are startups, the Financial Market Authority is presenting, the banks, central bank, and so on. And I mean, before the pandemic starts, we have already a deep connection to the fintech scene in Austria, because for this tokenization industry, it's becoming more and more important. That is something that we found out already before the pandemic. And that's why we also started the Delphi project for simulating that and try to work with other participants together, also with banks or startups and so on. And what I can see is, I think this is the future, that they are connecting together and working very more together. Maybe the one thing for the bridging at the moment, the obstacle, I think it's the missing regulatory framework, the MiCAR. You know, in the European Union there is a trilogue, European Parliament, European Commission, and Rat von Europa, Europäischer Rat. They all have a trilogue to set up the MiCAR, the Market Infrastructure Crypto Asset Regulation Framework. And I think this is something that is missing, because people, when they invest, for example, as a private person, they need trust in something. And if it's something is not regulated, I think that there is unsecured. So if there is a framework that could be more secure for the investors, for companies, for private consumers, and I think this is something that need to be set up, a regulatory framework, at least in the Euro system in Europe.
Jason, do you agree that we lack trust from the traditional world and from the regulators?
To an extent, yes, but I do think it's changing. You asked how have things changed, and I think there's an interesting symmetry between 2 years ago, the last time we had an in-person Davos, and this one. So 2 years ago, Libra had made their big announcement relatively recently, and so Libra then became Diem. And it scared every regulator around the world, and it moved the CBDC conversation forward at least 5 years. That's honestly probably a conservative estimate. Libra did what they did, and immediately every central bank was thinking about CBDCs and moved things forward. And then COVID, to your question, COVID also moved things forward in ways that I'm sure many of you have read about. I think there's an interesting symmetry right now. The implosion of Terra and Luna, I think, will have a similar effect on stablecoins. I think there's a huge number of people who 2 weeks ago had never heard algorithmic stablecoin, had never heard stablecoin, had no idea about any of this stuff, and now people have heard about this. It will almost certainly cause some short-term friction. There's going to be lots of confusion. People are going to have some extreme reactions to this, but I believe in the medium term, not even the long term, in the medium term, this could be the impetus for really starting to get some clarity, some regulatory clarity, some business clarity. And I think that leads to trust, like you're talking about, like you're asking about. So I'm actually quite hopeful for getting clearer guidance. And I think the stablecoin use case has been proven. And so I'm excited to see where it can go.
So you mentioned very important concepts, clarity and trust. In my opinion, it's all related to education. And it's definitely something that, again, in my opinion, should be the focus for the community, for the industry, in every communication that we set up, including those with our partners from traditional finance and regulators. So how do you see the status quo for the educational efforts that are coming from the industry? I maybe would like to start with Johannes, because like you are the one maybe who is who should be seeing it from outside. Do you think that the community is actually doing enough to educate mainstream audience, regulators, and business?
Thank you for the question. In Austria, there was lots of educational concepts, because in Austria we have the universities. They are providing courses for blockchain, crypto assets, and so on, and trying to see it from a neutral position. And I must say, there are also some medias. They are sometimes really write very hard to the crypto assets, because today we have one of our biggest media, the Standard. It's written because of Terra Luna. It says how to stop this crypto craziness. I'm not sure whether it's really too hard to the words. Yeah. So it's hard to say. For the fintech community in Austria, they do really a lot for the education, for clarify that crypto, or I would say crypto assets, is only a use case based on the blockchain. Blockchain itself is the technology behind many use cases, and I think many people, they are mixing together. When you talk about blockchain, it's Bitcoin or it's Ether, whatever. It's a speculation object. But I think education is really, really, really important to make sure that the technology behind it can be used for other things. Like our project, we use the technology for settlement security, and or maybe also for security. Like we took the data of the Austrian treasury for the government bond and calculate the hash code and persist it on the blockchain to make sure that nobody can manipulate it. So the technology has really a lot of potential. And education, I should say, is really, really important. And I think from my point of view, in Austria is doing a lot for that.
Interesting. How many courses do you know? How many universities in Austria?
We have the business university. It has the Austrian blockchain center. It's one of the biggest blockchain center in Europe, and there are five hubs: technology, legal, use cases, and so on. And also the technical university, they provide the technical courses like how to program smart contracts and to understand what is a smart contract. Well, when I ask everybody here in the room, smart contract, I'm sure everybody has its own definition. I'm sure. Everybody understands. For example, I talked to a banker. He told me, this is a digital accountant. When I tell him something, to transfer something, he's the program, he's the digital accountant, and write on the ledger the transaction. This is the one of the view, and others say this is a computer program with AI or whatever. And so on. So I think it's the common knowledge is very important, that we all talking about the same. And that's very important.
Thank you very much, Jason. I know that Stellar Foundation is doing a lot in terms of education. Mm-hmm. I would also like to highlight that, like, the percentage of developers now, blockchain developers out of the whole community of developers is really very small still. Mm. So how do you see this this balance being developed in the future months and years?
Yeah. Well, first off, I definitely do think the education is getting better. There's still a lot to do, but I think I used to work for Palantir Technologies, and when I started there, pretty much every CIO knew that big data was a thing, but almost none of them really knew what it was. And over the course of about 5 years, by the end of that, most actually knew what it was. That didn't mean they knew exactly what to do, but it was no longer just a buzzword for them. They knew what it was. I feel like I've noticed a very similar trend in, I'd call it, the last 2-3 years. I mean, like, a short way of putting it is, I hear way fewer dumb ideas now. You know, things that just, like, you've just mashed together the word blockchain and some other word.
Give an example.
Well, I have struck them from my memory, so I can't even remember the silly ones. But now, you know, I really don't hear that much. You know, it doesn't mean every single idea you hear is bound for success, but people get it in a way that they didn't before. And now, to your point about, you know, Stellar specifically and developer mindshare, you're absolutely right. And something that we've done is, so when Stellar was designed back in 2014, the idea was do a relatively narrow set of things really, really well. Do asset issuance and payments really well. And that served us great for those 8 years. But we've come to realize that we need to add smart contracts. And so we actually are doing that. So by the end of the year, Stellar will have smart contracts. But it's really important to us that we do it in a way that's very true to our mission of trying to bring equitable access to the financial system. So in particular, we're designing it in a way where you know, activity on the smart contract side will not increase fees exorbitantly on the payment side. As I'm sure many of you are aware, that can happen on chains like Ethereum. So we are adding to those possible use cases. We are adding to that feature set. And we believe that will only make that payments use case that sort of we started with that much stronger. And we think that will help with developer mindshare as well.
Thank you very much. Makoto, you also are working a lot on the research side. So I would be also interested in learning about the bridge between tech community and academian circles. Is there enough collaboration happening, in your opinion, now in terms of blockchain technology applications?
Well, I think not just in the blockchain space, but also in other industries as well. There's always kind of this gap between industry and academia. And I've worked before at other research labs for many years, actually in neuroscience in Japan. And in the blockchain space, it's the same. So there's a pretty big gap between the theory that's being done at the few universities that actually study blockchain in a detailed way, and what industry is doing. Because industry is really profit-driven, and so it's very fast-paced, it's fast-moving, you have feedback from users, move fast, break things, all this type of thing, right? Look at Luna Terra, this was an example. Maybe not the best, but these people were pushing forward new ideas, which is quite interesting. And there's many exciting projects in the space. So we're like in the Polkadot community, and this is really, really building up a whole new ecosystem from scratch in the last few years, which is quite fascinating and exciting. But for academia, there's a lot of theoretical problems that can be solved by hard research. Things like scalability, and a lot of this is getting a lot better already. But I see a lot of the work that academia is doing being too slow to be relevant in the fast-paced, DeFi context, for instance, because things are just moving so fast. Even if you're actually building production software, you're always moving too slow for the customer. The customer always is very demanding and always wants things instantly. And I'm sure the Stellar Foundation sees this as well. So I think there's a role for academia more in the long-term space. So try to figure out, how do we, if everyone in the whole world did every transaction on a blockchain, how would you do that? What is the foundation you would build? What's the architecture? Do you have a mix of layers, zeros with a relay chain like Polkadot? Do you have some super layer 1, or do you have layer 2 as a scaling solution? So these are really problems that can be solved at a theoretical level, but as far as industry cares about, it's better to build apps that people use and then release it. So there's still this gap, and I've seen this in other spaces too. In every job I worked at previously, we always had this gap between conference papers and theoretic stuff and actually working with the end user customer, because it's a very different field.
Could we talk a little bit more about the speed? So what are the advantages and disadvantages of the level of the speed in the industry, and how you personally and your projects are managing to orient yourselves among all these ideas that you mentioned that are constantly appearing? And definitely there is a level of creativity now in the blockchain industry that is incomparable. How do you orient yourselves toward the right direction, toward the right solution, towards the sustainable solution?
Well, I mean, I'll start. As a layer 1, our job is to sort of contribute to building out the core feature set, and then the world builds on it. So I think the speed really comes from the people that are building on a Stellar or building on other networks, or at least that's our goal. And that's especially what we're thinking about by adding smart contracts. We want to increase that speed of sort of trust minimized innovation. And we want to sort of empower people with the tool sets they need. And we do feel like because we've been able to sort of observe what has worked, what hasn't worked, we think we can do that in a really smart way. So as a layer 1, I think, we also very much do not want to move fast and break things. That was interesting when I first joined. I mean, when you're releasing an open protocol into the world, that doesn't really work. So you still want to move fast, but you got to get it right. And so we definitely have a deep culture of thinking about things very carefully from all angles and sort of get that right answer. And then I think the real velocity comes from the people building on the network.
Thank you. Makoto.
Yeah, being a first mover is not always the best thing. In fact, it's better to watch a lot of these, kind of open, unaudited projects that release some cool idea, and then people use them. Sometimes they blow up, but even if they blow up, like Lunaterra is a great example. There's some really good ideas there. I think you just have to have some better concepts, like guarantees of exit liquidity, things like that. You have to plan for the rainy day, not just the sunny day, when you're designing protocols. But there's some really cool ideas that you can learn from. And what we do, so for example, we contribute a lot to the Sora ecosystem. In fact, sponsoring a wine party here tomorrow. If you're invited, please come. Or talk to Sophia or Sandra, or one of the people. So Sora is a really cool layer 1 network, but it's also interesting because we have a parachain on Kusama as well. And it's kind of this new, Polkadot kind of DeFi type of project. But what we try to do is not copy other projects directly, but I've been in the blockchain space since like 2013, and so I kind of have my own like philosophy and ideas about how things should be done. What's the direction that humanity should be going forward? And so I try to come up with like a long-term strategic idea, like we kind of need these pieces, and then somebody else could build this type of piece. And we saw this with the Sora network, where we contributed to a decentralized exchange that was released, and then later another team came and built a farming platform. We didn't have to build all this, but it was kind of like we're building the foundation that other people can come and build new things on top of. Like somebody could build a lending platform if there's a need for it. But we tried to take a slow and steady approach where we move way too slow for our users. It's always going to be like that, but it's important to not make obvious mistakes. It's important to test things well, to audit the code, work with great parties like Munify. I saw the panel yesterday. So it's really great that there's a good ecosystem around this type of security and testing and making sure that things that are delivered are high quality. But it's also really important that there are some people who don't do that, who actually go and sit down for a weekend, write some code, release it, maybe it blows up. But there's some ideas there that are really quite valuable. Just don't invest your house into platforms like that.
Johannes, what is your way of balancing the speed and sustainability?
So the speed and the sustainability, from the central bank point of view, we are quite neutral. So for us, we are having...
neutral means slow?
No, neutral means we are looking at the market, what is the market doing, and then we are trying... Well, if the market is slow, then we adapt the speed. So, for example, our unit, Treasury, we have a really deep contact to the fintech community in Austria, and we are looking what are they doing, and we also have an innovation lab in the Austrian National Bank that we can make sandboxes for testing. And this is very important for us because we have different units. We have the banking authority, we have the statistic colleagues, we have the payment colleagues, and blockchain is a topic that touches every unit in the bank, or almost nearly every, the economics colleagues. So our sandbox, we're creating the product and with prototyping to see, okay, what is the impact on each unit? And then we try to get a more and more result as possible.
Are there a lot of your colleagues who have invested in crypto in the bank?
I don't know. I don't know. We do not talk about it.
So you discuss blockchain without discussing...
Exactly, yeah. We are discussing about the use cases.
They haven't invested,
I don't know.
In the recent 2 weeks, I guess anyone who invested in Terra has
this disclaimer, I don't know.
Have they been in bad moods the last 2 weeks or good moods? Maybe...
Yeah.
Before I give the floor to the questions from the audience, I would like to dream about the future, the sustainable, bright future with the great friendship between TradFi and DeFi. So how do you see the industry developing, let's say, during the last couple of years, hoping that there will be no other pandemic and that the other very stopping things that happened this year will stop as soon as possible? How do you see this development? Which challenges do you think are the first to be overcome? And which new opportunities we should grab the first?
May I start?
Sure.
Coming back to the question of the speed, in comparison to the other central banks, Austria central bank is quite fast. We talk to many central banks. We are really, really good. To the question, development and challenges. So I think in the early morning, we hear today the TTF, the token taxonomy framework and so on. I think what we need is, at least my personal opinion, we need frameworks for that, for common knowledge, that we're all talking about the same, and we have the same understanding, and frameworks that you can move inside the regulatory framework, because so many startups in Austria, they are not sure whether they offend the judge or not. So they're asking lawyers and so on, and many lawyers have different opinions. Yeah, when we're talking about security, just the security word, yeah, we're like Germany, Switzerland, Austria. The culture is similar, but the definition of financial security is different. In Switzerland, when you have a tokenized, I talked before to a colleague, he told me, yes, in Switzerland, it would be recognized as a security when you tokenize it on as a security token. In Austria, we have the word Wertpapier, means paper of value. The word paper is inside. That means it must be a paper behind it. So there's completely different definition. It starts from here.
Paper?
Paper, yeah. That means you need to print the security as a paper and store it, for example. And this is the law. In Germany, they have the electronic Wertpapiergesetz, electronic security law. So it's really different, yeah.
This makes me think about, the word digital comes from digitus, that is like digit, finger. So like we call it digital space, but we do not think anymore that we have to touch it, and still we use this word. Jason.
Yeah, I think, I guess I probably said stablecoin like 50 times. I do think in the next 5 years, I think stablecoins that's where we'll see the most advancement. I think 5 years probably is a little too soon for serious CBDC use, but I do think stablecoins will become more accepted just generally. More institutions, more entities will be comfortable using stablecoins, whether that's settling credit card transactions or remittances, just across the gamut of payments. I do think, however, and I think this is a really important point, all of these different forms of money, different forms of payments, they are supplements. They are additional tools at our disposal. They don't have to replace anything. People often frame this argument like, okay, imagine there's no more cash. Why? Why do we have to do that? Maybe eventually there won't be cash, but to start, stablecoins or anything else can just be another thing that we use. So I think that's a really important point. I think the CEO of MasterCard does not actually believe SWIFT will be gone in 5 years. I think he just wanted to be contrary on the panel. Wires aren't going anywhere. Physical cash isn't going anywhere. But we can introduce new tools for new use cases and to help people.
Thank you very much, Jason. Makoto, what is your ideal and realistic view of the future?
Well, the ideal vision of the future would be everyone uses Sora for everything. But the realistic vision, I think, is a multipolar world where you will have countries like El Salvador, for instance, that use crypto as legal tender. And there'll be, I think, many more countries that do that, especially in the developing world. And then you'll have places like the EU that we don't even know if self-hosted wallets will be allowed. So it's gonna be a very stark dichotomy between countries that are kind of over-regulating, but they're doing it because they don't have a need for cryptocurrency, and countries that are maybe even under-regulating because they have a need for smooth transactions, financial inclusion. Maybe not everyone has an ID card, for instance, in these places, and you have to kind of balance these different needs and harmonization of regulation with the knowledge that people are not the same everywhere in the world. They have different needs, different cultures, different societies, and you need to respect that. And you need to build tools that will help, each group of people to have the best, to really meet their potential. Because life is really short. You want people to be able to do the most in their lifetime, push humanity forward. Go to Mars with Elon Musk, all these things. So I think that's really, I think what we're going to see. We're going to see over-regulation in maybe the developed world and more like crypto liberalism, libertarianism in the developing world.
Interesting. Thank you so much. We have 3 Swiss minutes for your questions. Joseph. Can we please, or come here? I'll give you mine. No, because otherwise, I guess we won't hear you on the stream.
Yeah, there's a video stream.
It's more for Johannes, because last week El Salvador hosted 44 central bankers from the global south, and they all went there, and the idea was to talk about financial inclusion and investments for small and medium-sized businesses. But at the same time, they were there learning how to use Bitcoin, transact with it. They were wearing Bitcoin T-shirts. It was clearly a Bitcoin conference. Were you curious by this? Would you have gone to El Salvador, had the invitation passed across your desk? What's your sort of take on this?
So, I mean, at least I didn't receive the invitation, so I cannot participate. But from my point of view, personal point of view, it's okay when they got when El Salvador invites 44 central banks. So, absolutely all right for me.
I heard from one of the central banks that attended that they were given a 2-week vacation in El Salvador. So I think that makes a difference.
This was the temptation, real temptation. Okay. Another question, please. Afi. Thank you very much for coming.
What are your thoughts between private stable coins and CBDCs, especially in the Eurozone? Do you see, a balanced market, competing market? What are your thoughts?
Great question, thank you.
Simply, I think there will be both, and I think that's totally fine. I don't think they have to be in conflict. I think some use cases will make sense for stablecoins. I think others will make sense for CBDCs. You could have situations where the stablecoins are backed by CBDC reserves instead of cash in a bank account. So, simply put, I think they can absolutely coexist.
I think I'll just add to that I think one of the trends that I expect to see, because I also want to contribute to the space, but that's not just targeting fiat currencies as an index of stability, but also maybe cost of living goods, like a consumer price index type of based stablecoin, because when you have high inflation, especially higher energy costs and kind of like unstable, purchasing power of fiat currencies, it can be helpful to have a stablecoin that's actually pegged to some other cost of living index. I mean, there's different ways you could do this. It's hard to come up with a good situation where you don't have like a Terra Luna situation where you lose the peg and hyperinflate out. So you do have to have sufficient exit liquidity to meet demand, and that's always hard to do in a decentralized way. But I'm sure some smart person will figure it out.
Yeah, for me, so as you said, I think there could be a coexistence. It depends because the CBDC in the Eurozone is at the moment in the early stages. Nobody knows how it will look like, which use cases will be covered. But in cases, maybe there are stablecoins better for using it. So why not? But I think it's important to wait for the MiCAR, because in the MiCAR, the stablecoins are regulated within the Eurozone. I think then we will know more what is in the framework and what are the regulations. And I think without regulations, it's quite difficult for stablecoins.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone. Please applaud to our wonderful panelists, so diverse and enthusiasts. And enjoy Davos. Thank you.